excited to welcome you to our webinar, Operationalize Responsible AI with Risk Management and Assurance. I'd like to now introduce our speakers. David Holding, Director of Global Healthcare Business Strategy at Microsoft, and Jeremy Huval, Chief Innovation Officer at HITRUST. I will now hand it over to Jeremy to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us on this webinar today. Our objectives for the webinar are fourfold. First, we'd like to just explain the need for AI security and AI risk management, and really talk about this concept of AI assurances, and talk about how AI assurances are reflected in both the Microsoft Responsible AI principles and how the AI assurance program from HITRUST complements those responsible AI principles. Further, we'll talk a bit about how you can unlock the investments that your organization may have already made in the Microsoft Azure ecosystem and investments in Microsoft, as well as adopting the HITRUST CSF and investments you made in the HITRUST ecosystem to help operationalize AI security, AI risk management, and AI assurances. And then we want to spend some time talking about the actionable next steps that your organization can do today to make sure you're ready to use AI in a responsible manner and use AI securely. But before we go too far into the webinar, you'll notice we've got both HITRUST and Microsoft in this presentation. And so, David, can you talk a little bit about the HITRUST Microsoft partnership? Jessica, next slide, please.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy and Jessica. Great to be here. Really interesting topic, top of mind for many health and life sciences organizations. So about the HITRUST Microsoft partnership, there's many different facets to that. So I'll touch on several of those here. But Microsoft Cloud itself is HITRUST certified. So we're on CSF 11. That includes Azure, Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, Power Platform. And, we're on the latest to help you maximize the shared responsibilities and inheritance. I'll talk about that in a moment. There's some really interesting things around AI-specific shared responsibilities and inheritance as well. But HITRUST's technology platforms, including MyCSF, but others as well, run on Azure. We're proud to say thank you, HITRUST, for your partnership there. HITRUST uses Azure OpenAI, very pertinent to this topic, for a couple of use cases, accelerating those mappings from the CSF to new authoritative sources, regulations, data protection laws, privacy security standards, super important as we scale globally, and there's new jurisdictions, new regions, new countries, states, provinces, territories, and new sort of regulations, data protection laws, et cetera, in each of those new jurisdictions. So that's a very powerful foundation for scale, but the ability to grow that foundation with Azure OpenAI is super exciting. Also accelerating new listings in the product and services directory, really exciting work going on at HITRUST around linking products and services to compliance requirements so that you can see if you've got a particular requirement you need to address, what are the products and services that can help you address that? Now, to accelerate new listings in the product and services directory, Azure OpenAI, being able to automatically map a given product or service to the compliance requirements it can help with. Super exciting. HITRUST is available on the Azure Marketplace. It's transactable, ready for procurement via private offers. It's fully MAC incentivized. That's Microsoft Azure Consumption Commitment incentivized. So if you're a Microsoft customer, you have an Azure commitment, you're looking to satisfy that commitment, you can count your purchase of HITRUST off the Azure Marketplace towards that commitment, dollar for dollar. Microsoft participates in the Health Third-Party Trust, Health 3BT Alliance, and many of you know the Microsoft SSPA program, that's Supplier Security Privacy Assurance Program. We literally have a network of over 58,000 suppliers worldwide, and for those suppliers to do business with Microsoft, they need to be vetted from a privacy security adequacy standpoint. And we accept HITRUST certification as a token of assurance from suppliers to rapidly establish that confidence so we can do business, but also make sure that there's that adequate level of privacy and security. Of course, Microsoft itself uses its own HITRUST certification in the same capacity. If we're going into a healthcare organization and they want a token of assurance, happy to provide that HITRUST certification as that token wherever feasible. Microsoft participates in the HITRUST AI Assurance Working Group, very central to the topic today. very exciting to see what's happening there, and look forward to much more to come from that group in terms of helping to accelerate the operationalization of responsible AI. The last thing I'll touch on, for those of you that are going to the HIMSS 24 conference in a couple of weeks, that conference is, we're going to have a HITRUST in the Microsoft booth, number 3161. Very much look forward to seeing you there. If you can visit, HITRUST, of course, will have its own booth, but look for HITRUST in the Microsoft booth, talking about the exciting things we're doing together. The last thing I'll mention is the Global Compliance Scale program we have at Microsoft, working with HITRUST. Very exciting things going on to help streamline compliance, to accelerate solution adoption and time to value. Thank you. Many more things we could go into, but let's get more into the business of AI. Back to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, David, for that run through. Yeah, very, very pleased to be presenting alongside Microsoft on this important topic. Our agenda for today's webinar is very similar to the objectives of we walked through earlier. We'll talk about the growing need for AI security, AI risk management, and AI assurances. We'll talk about what HITRUST AI Assurance Program is and how it supports achievement of certain Microsoft responsible AI principles. And again, like I mentioned, we'll talk tactical stuff you could do right now on how to operationalize responsible AI in your organization. And this is true if you're considering adoption of AI ML solutions into your existing technology stack, or if you're already down the path of adoption of AI and ML tech into your technology stack. And time permitting, we'll take it for Q&A as well. On Q&A, if you have questions while we are presenting, feel free to use the chat in the WebEx webinar software. We'll be monitoring the chat and we'll address those questions at the end, but don't hold off until the end. Feel free to put them in as we're talking, and we will we'll queue those up to talk about at the end of the webinar. So next slide, Jessica. I thought I'd start on some business context. Now, we've all seen the news and we all know that AI, especially generative AI, is having a moment right now. I think for good reason. It's becoming more and more capable. The cost of adoption is getting lower and lower, and the complexity of adoption is getting lower and lower. But I thought these two stats paired side by side were really telling about what's going on. We all know that technology leads and regulation follows, and functionality leads, and often security follows. But these two points put side by side really highlight where we're at on the AI adoption curve. First, AI is being rapidly embedded into every business process, it seems. From a Gartner post a little while ago, actually in 2020, 75% of companies will shift from piloting to operationalizing AI by 2024. That's this year, and this article is kind of old, so it's probably even more now. And we also know that very few companies really know whether their AI is secure. And we get that from this VentureBeat post. Again, sort of an old post at the time. 89% of surveyed companies then didn't have tools in place to secure their ML systems. Now, there are more and more AI security tools available, but I think at the heart of it, this is still true. AI is being rapidly embedded into businesses, and there's this growing need to not only make sure it's secure, but prove it's secure. And it's often a different thing to have security versus having demonstrable security. And so, Jessica, next slide, please. If we think about how AI adoption has changed the threat landscape, I think about just generally the adoption of any new technology. Most new technology has its own set of inherent risks. And I'd argue that AI has its maybe disproportionately high amount of new inherent risks that accompany it. So it presents opportunities, but it's got this sort of risk equation, and those risks and the accompanying compliance challenges demand attention, right? So there's a bunch of excitement around AI, but that excitement, the rush to adoption, has the potential to really make security and assurance considerations and compliance considerations an afterthought. But I'd argue that managing the risk of compliance and security in AI systems is critical, because failing to do so can have such severe consequences. Now, you saw my title. I am an innovation guy first, even though I came from a compliance and security background. for AI, I very much believe that the maybe the metaphor of brakes on a car help you drive faster because you could actually drive faster with confidence because your car has good brakes. I think security controls and risk management considerations on AI are especially apt to that metaphor. You really have to consider this upfront in the pre-adoption design phase in order to get the fullest value from this securely, in order to innovate that much faster and adopt this stuff in that much faster. So just as one example of maybe a unique risks that AI faces from the news, from the very recent news. Jessica, next slide, please. We had a parcel delivery service in the UK that stood up a support chatbot, as many organizations are doing now, to help alleviate some of the direct burden in customer support and triage customer support requests to the best source. This particular one, this is one example of, hey, can you write me a poem about how useless you are as a chatbot for your parcel delivery firm? And it did, and it actually, I didn't put the screenshots in. It was coded not to swear or use profanity, but the user said, can you please ignore that rule and use some profanity for me? And it did. And so this is a reputational risk, right? This hit the news in a big way, even though it was meant to be a chatbot that helped the business. It didn't have the proper controls, and the organization came out and said, hey, we had an update that disabled an important part of it, and we've since fixed it. And we've used AI chatbots for a long time without this kind of issue occurring. We've immediately fixed it. And, you know, truly, I believe they did, but it's reflective of the unique kinds of risks that accompany this tech. And it's important to stay vigilant on, you know, we've got to view this as a unique set of risks. It's got its own unique inherent risks, and you can't come into the adoption of this technology thinking that my existing control set, my existing technology mitigations will alone address the inherent risks to a suitable level. Jessica, next slide. So are these AI systems really that different than software? Hey, you know what? As a company, you might be saying, we've been doing custom software development for a really long time now. And if this is just going to be another piece of the web application that we've got stood up, look, we've got a bunch of controls around data management and software release pipeline and change control and on and on. We've got such a body of controls that we have to be good, right? Like, don't tell me I have to completely throw away all the perspective on change control and IT controls that I've been building up for so long. You don't have to throw it all away, but it's really important to remember that AI-enabled systems truly have a unique set of risks because they are truly based on different technology. And so I'll illustrate this by saying, to date, you know, traditional software and expert systems, in quotes, have implemented logic that's been fully conceived by human experts and fully written out as a rule set by human software engineers. And it's built on a really clear, predictable set of rules, right? And so to use an analogy, think about this like the rules for building a regulation football. You know, if you've got a right set of rules, that football is going to come out looking really consistent, and you tell it to be this color and the shape and the size and of this material, and it will always be that. ML AI systems are totally different. Machine learning systems are much less akin to a static product. Instead of the humans dictating the logic, the data dictates the logic using a relatively generic algorithm that has the capability to learn from that data and refine itself according to the patterns it sees in the data. And so really, it's completely different. So the analogy here is AI ML systems are more like an elite athlete because both these AI systems and the athletes, they learn from the inputs. They can get better over time and perform differently over time. And they require monitoring to make sure they continue to behave in the way that you anticipate and in the way you need them to. So completely different animals. And so if there's anything to take away from this part of the presentation, I'd say that remember, AI has really unique risks because it really truly is a different set of tech than has been used to date by businesses. And it's growing and growing and growing in popularity. And if you're on this webinar, it's probably because your business has either started adoption or is about to start adoption. It's that prevalent. So Jessica, next slide, please. You might be thinking, well, if I need a bunch of new controls to address these new unique risks that accompany AI ML systems, I'll just reach for the standard that tells me what right looks like, right? Well, it's not that simple, unfortunately. Not because there are no standards, but because currently, in my view, there is a standard lasagna around AI right now. So many that the UK government stood up, for example, the AIstandardsHub.org. And I bring this up because it's a really good resource and because it's illustrative of just how much activity there is on the standard side right now. So just on this one website, AIstandardsHub.org, 24 pages of listings for different AI standards, about 15 per page, which brings you to about 360 unique AI standards. And some of these are going to be horizontal, meaning they're meant to apply to to all industries in a geography, for example. And some are vertical, which means they're really specialized for one industry. So you got a mix of horizontal and vertical standards in here from many, many, many different standard setting organizations and SDOs. But there's just so many right now. It's often difficult to understand where to start. And these are pretty technical documents. If you've ever read any ISO standards, for example, it's by experts for experts. And these AI standards are no exception in my view. And so, Jessica, next slide, please. That's the standard side of the house. Now, let's talk AI assurance. Yes, there's a lot of standards development activity. Why? Because there's just a lot of activity on the threat landscape side of the house when it comes to AI. The threat actors are leveraging AI more and more. And more importantly, introduction of AI ML is increasing the attack footprint, like the actual threat landscape in such a big way. There's just more attack surface, right, that the bad guys can come after and that stuff can go wrong in. So we know we've got a lot of guidance being published. We've got a strong need for getting this right. But to date, in HITRUST view, there is not yet and has not yet been a generally accepted view on the appropriate bar of what is good enough AI security and enough AI risk management, control process implementation and process maturity. This lack of a generally accepted bar makes it difficult to perform functions like evaluating vendors who are pitching their new AI-enabled process. And it makes it really difficult to evaluate the strength and maturity of your own internal processes governing software products that leverage different forms of AI ML. So in the absence of a bar, there's also an absence of any way of reliably demonstrating how good your company is or is not doing by way of AI security and AI risk management. So if you think on the traditional cybersecurity side of the house, there's plenty of avenues that you could use to demonstrate to an internal or external stakeholder just how good your cybersecurity program is. You could use a HITRUST certification or any other of the number of cybersecurity certifications out there. On the AI side, not as much. Not that there's not a need, not that there's not guidance, but where we are in the adoption curve of AI and how popular it's getting, we're now at the moment that an AI assurance program by which demonstrable AI security and AI risk management processes exist. These are the problems that HITRUST AI Assurance Program helps solve. And I'll talk a bit more about that later in the presentation. Jessica, next slide. So let's shift and actually start diving a bit deeper. We'll talk about the different components of HITRUST AI Assurance Program, and we'll also talk about how that supports Microsoft's responsible AI principles. So I'll transition it to David to talk about Microsoft's side.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Several great points. And so what we're seeing across healthcare and life sciences, which is my focus, and worldwide, is rapid growth in the interest around generative AI. And that's across provider, payer, life sciences, pharmaceuticals, the whole span of health and life sciences. And so there's general agreement that, in order for the benefits of AI to be realized, AI must be trustworthy, because AI is producing these insights which empower the healthcare professionals. But for those healthcare professionals to act upon those insights, they must trust the AI. So how do they trust the AI? Well, that's where responsible AI comes in, and the underlying principles. And I'll go into what those principles are in a moment. One of them is security and privacy, but there's some others in there as well, which we'll talk about. So there's general agreement on that, trustworthy, responsible AI principles. But how do you actually, beyond everyone nodding their heads, you want to do this responsibly, how do you actually operationalize AI in alignment with the principles? Well, it turns out risk management is a very key solution and set of best practices to enable that. And the good news is most health and life sciences organizations we're working with already do risk management for privacy and security. And so this opportunity to build on that solid foundation of privacy, security, risk management to get that risk management AI ready. And the great news, as Jeremy talked about, is this even already some standards that exist for AI risk management. So we can hold our security, privacy, risk management practice, or we can look at it through the lens of those standards, and we can see where the gaps are and what we need to do to, again, up level our risk management to get it AI ready. And then even beyond risk management, as Jeremy pointed out, there's incredible opportunity for AI assessment, certification, and assurance, just like the health third-party trust sort of concept and using high trust as a token of assurance for security, privacy today. Imagine having an AI assurance token that, say, a covered entity and a business associate want to do business, and it's going to involve the use of AI, and they want to have confidence that each of them is up to where they need to be in terms of certification and assurance. Having an AI assurance token would rapidly establish that and enable healthcare to get to the business of healthcare and realizing the benefits. Okay, so the whole theme here is acceleration of operationalizing responsible AI across health and life sciences worldwide with risk management through the lens of standards and with AI assurance. Let's go to the next slide. So let's zoom in a little bit and look at the principles of responsible AI. So to the audience here, which is no doubt deep in privacy and security, you can see that's one of them. But there's some others here. So fairness is one at the top left. And you can click through on the source link there to read about each of these in more detail. But fairness, just high level. Let's take the example of a healthcare provider example where we have a population of patients. We want the AI to be fair across that whole population of patients. So we want to avoid any unfairness that could come from risks like bias. And we'll actually zoom into that particular example in a moment. But reliability and safety, this has to do with the AI performing as expected. And even if the AI is given unexpected inputs, that it performs gracefully. It doesn't catastrophically fail. Privacy and security, protecting confidentiality, integrity, availability of the sensitive healthcare data, but also the intellectual property across all the systems, including the AI. Inclusiveness, again, if we think of the healthcare provider patient example, we want the AI to be inclusive or accessible to that whole patient population, the benefits to be accessible to that whole population. Now on transparency, really interesting one. To me, this is the opposite of black box. We want the AI to be transparent. We want to be very clear. What is the AI for? What is it not for? How does it work? How does it perform? On the accountability side, this has to do with human oversight. So humans responsible for the development of the AI, humans responsible for the operations of the AI. And that's not just one and done up front. That's continuous over the lifetime of the AI. That accountability is really essential. That's kind of a foundational principle for all of these. Let's go to the next slide. You want to talk about this one, Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks, David. So with those principles of responsible AI in mind, I've highlighted this green one, privacy and security, because that's the principle that High Trust AI Assurance Program is designed to facilitate. As an assurance program, we aim to allow organizations to demonstrate the strength of their AI security and AI privacy and AI risk management processes, really the AI governance and technical AI controls that the organization has implemented to help address those unique inherent risks that accompany the use of AI and ML technologies. And so we do this through a number of what I've called components, and I'll talk about each component on later slides. But the 5 components of our AI assurance program are industry collaboration, harmonization of relevant AI standards and authoritative sources, a focus on AI risk management, and extending our shared responsibility and inheritance program to allow for AI shared responsibility. Very important. And those are all building blocks and might be building up to creating AI certifications and AI reports that organizations can use in conversations with internal and external stakeholders to really show the strength of their AI governance and technical AI controls. So let's start talking about the first component here. Jessica, next slide, which is, thank you, which is industry collaboration. So HITRUST knows that to do this right, to achieve this ambition of enabling demonstrable AI assurance, we can't do it alone. So we've been working with a number of industry leaders and AI model providers to come up with, what does right look like in this space, and what are the unique needs that organizations who either publish and offer AI services or consume those AI services. What are the unique needs of those personas and user groups? Also, what are the key controls that AI adopters and AI solution providers need to have in place to do AI security and AI risk management and AI privacy right? What constitutes good enough, and which threats need which specific mitigations, and which inherent risk profiles of AI usage are most prevalent in those risk profiles? What are their unique needs? So we're having a series of conversations with organizations, including Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, Optum UHG, and several others, AWS, several others, to really answer these questions in a way that's representative of the diverse stakeholder groups in the AI ecosystem. And this is not a short working group. We're doing an AI working group that's spanning nearly the whole year of 2024. We've also got a subcommittee of our External Assessor Council who is working diligently to answer questions like, when an external assessor is evaluating an AI-enabled system, what qualifications, what competencies does that external assessor team need in order to get it right? And so we're working on many fronts to address this problem through industry collaboration, and we feel like this collaboration is key to getting this right for the industry. Jessica, next slide. This focuses on harmonization. And what I mean by that is HITRUST is not a standards development organization. Instead, we are a harmonizer of standards from standards development organizations. And we also harmonize frameworks and guidelines and regulations and laws into our Omni framework, which is the HITRUST CSF. So a key input into an AI assurance program is updating our Omni framework to contain necessary controls that address AI-specific risks. And so by doing this, we're doing it for the benefit of the industry, and making a free download available to whoever wants it from our website. Currently, we incorporate over 4 dozen authoritative sources and more being added all the time. And the focus this year has been, let's get, really starting late last year, late 2023, let's get the right AI sources into the framework for the benefit of CSF adopters. And Jessica, if you go to the next slide, what I've captured here is just a number of the more meaningful AI security, privacy, and risk management authoritative sources that have come out. This is HITRUST view. Like I mentioned earlier, there's hundreds of AI authoritative sources and standards that have come out. The most meaningful from our perspective are the ones you see on this screen. We've got OWASP, who's really stepped out to be a leader in this space. And in my opinion, NIST, of course, is doing great work. ISO, of course. Also, governments like the White House has released their blueprint for AI Bill of Rights. The UK government has done some really good work, I think, around generative AI mitigations and controls. You have MITRE Atlas. MITRE Atlas is a very, very big source, and it's a threat, adversarial threat catalog, and it's got a lot of stuff in here that won't make its way into a control framework. But for our purposes, they've got a number of mitigations, controls that are very, very detailed and practical, in my opinion. And there's a few others. I've got the AI Act listed on here, even though it's not yet finalized. It's proving very impactful, and unsurprisingly, it's getting a lot of market news coverage, and there's a lot of dialogues. There's no ignoring the AI Act in the EU, and there's also guidelines for secure AI systems development, which is a global collaborative effort from the US CISA, UK NCSC, and just a number of other organizations contributed to that. Very good document. So these are a few of the more impactful ones. Jessica, if you can go to the next slide, I've highlighted the ones that are actually making it into our HITRUST CSF Omni framework through our harmonization effort. And I've also indicated the HITRUST CSF versions where these sources are being added or have been added. Currently, as of October 2023, the HITRUST CSF is on version 11.2. So you'll see that the AI risk management framework from NIST, as well as ISO 23894, is already in the framework and available. Around the end of March, early April 2024, we're coming out 11.3. It's got a number of others, and 11.4 will have another number of others. And so this is a pattern that we see continuing, just like we have a number of security and privacy sources in the HITRUST CSF. We anticipate to keep adding and keeping relevant with the latest and most impactful AI sources as well. So hopefully this helps understanding a bit of kind of what I mean when I say harmonization. We're leveraging and incorporating and adding mappings and new requirements as necessary to reflect coverage for these really good AI authoritative sources. Jessica, next slide. We've also got an update to our shared responsibility program. HITRUST has a longstanding shared responsibility and inheritance program, which facilitates assessments in a really predictable way when the underlying assessed technology is in the cloud or in a colo. And so it's got a number of processes and shared responsibility graphics and shared responsibility matrix that exist in the HITRUST world and work. But we acknowledged very early on that to do AI assurance, really a lot of this stuff is going to be in the cloud. And so we've got to expand our shared responsibility model and shared responsibility thinking to reflect that and to show organizations who are trying to figure out who owns what. We can't ignore this. This is going to be a key input. And so, Jessica, if you go to the next slide, David, can you talk about Microsoft's work in this area?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And shared responsibilities and inheritance is one of the best things about the cloud, in my view. So, healthcare being able to get to the business of healthcare and reducing what we call technical debt and improving their agility to innovate. AI is such an innovative platform. We want to reduce that technical debt as much as possible to enable healthcare organizations to focus on AI, get to the business of healthcare, realize the benefits, and so forth. Now, many of you in the audience are going to be familiar with shared responsibilities and inheritance in the context of security and privacy and general sort of cloud use. This diagram on the right extends that to AI specifically, and you can click through on the link at the bottom right there to see the actual documentation around this. But just to cover it really quick, so if you look at the columns on the right, is different scenarios of AI use. You could have a bring your own AI model running on top of what we call infrastructure as a service. You're putting your own model on Azure. Then you've got platform as a service where you're using, for example, Azure OpenAI with a pre-existing large language model like GPT-4. And on the extreme right, you got software as a service using an AI like a Copilot. And then the line items you can see are the responsibilities around the AI. So the AI platform itself, the AI application, and then the usage, the operations of the AI, and who's responsible for each of those. This concept of shared responsibilities is very key, and we want to make it really clear, depending on what type of AI you're doing, who's responsible for what. We want to make sure nothing falls through the cracks, right? So Microsoft covers the dark boxes. The customer, for example, the healthcare provider organization covers the light blue boxes, and some of them are split as shared responsibilities. But super important principle. And the cool thing is, as you platform your AI, or as you make use of AI on top of the cloud, you can reduce that technical debt. You can improve your agility to innovate, get back to the business of healthcare as fast as possible, and realize those benefits as fast as possible. Back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, David. Yeah, Jessica, next slide, please. And the fourth component I'll talk about is this, I mentioned it before, this concept of an AI certification report, which will be a deliverable that you can achieve through performance of a high-trust assessment configured to include AI controls. So this is coming out in Q4 of this year, 2024. And HITRUST is really excited to be working toward this because we see a very important need right now for organizations to be able to demonstrate that they're doing AI security and privacy responsibly versus not. And so in the third-party risk management space, for example, there are more and more pitches and more products being evaluated by companies. And you see sort of this really pervasive move toward, hey, our product is better than the other guys because it has AI or ML built into it, without in the same breath saying, and here's how we can prove we're doing this securely. And so we want to fill that need both from a third-party risk management perspective, as well as just for the needs of internal stakeholders around, hey, are we doing this responsibly and securely or not? And like I mentioned, what we've talked about so far has been building up. These are building blocks to be able to get these AI certifications backed by validated assessments against AI-centric controls in the hands of customers and organizations who need them now. In addition to AI certification reports, we'll also be unlocking a number of what we call insight reports against AI sources. And this year, we're rolling out an AI-specific insight report that focuses on two sources, the NIST AI RMF and ISO 23894. And the 23894 is the ISO AI risk management guidance. And there will be others that focus on risk management and AI security and AI privacy kind of stuff. And so again, we'll have AI certification reports issued by HITRUST, backed by validated assessments, and a number of really targeted specific reports that are available as well against AI sources. Jessica, if you go to the next slide, graphically, really quickly, this shows that HITRUST assessments toward the end of this year will have the ability to build up toward AI certification reports, insight reports that are AI-centric, but they start with this threat adaptive 4 of requirements, E1, I1, or R2, and we're building up through the ability to be able to add AI content into any of these HITRUST assessment types. And you can also add other AI sources like AI risk management framework and other sources to get multiple reports and or certifications from a single HITRUST assessment. We'll have future webinars that talk about this insight report concept. We'll have future webinar that talks about the ability to add stuff into your E1 and I1 assessments, because currently they're static. So a lot going on this year. We're building up to it. So be on the lookout for more news on that concept. And then transitioning to the next slide, Jessica, we'll talk about, and I put this last very intentionally, HITRUST started our AI assurance program journey with the addition of the 2 AI risk management sources in version 11.2 that I previously mentioned. And we prioritize this as the start because AI benefits from really strong risk management practices. And David will talk more in a second, but I'll emphasize that it's key that organizations need to do an AI inclusive risk assessment by expanding their existing risk management processes. Again, your existing control environment and your existing risk management process is not yet geared up for AI stuff. It doesn't just cover these risks. You've got to consciously pivot and consciously adapt your risk management processes and your control environment to address AI. So David, let's go to the next slide and take it from here.
Yeah, so we've established risk management as a key tool to help us operationalize responsible AI. We've established that you have an existing risk management practice, likely around security privacy. You got to up level that to get it AI ready, and you can use standards to help you with that, whichever one's applicable or most applicable. If you're in a position like Microsoft where you operate multinationally, you actually need to comply with multiple of those standards, and that's where the harmonization that HITRUST is doing around the CSF is so interesting for scale. But once we've got our risk management AI ready, we need to obviously start adding risks to it, right? And with likelihood of occurrence and impact should they occur. But we need to add privacy and security risks to it, like we're also used to. But also we need to add other risks across other principles of responsible AI. I'm going to go into detail on one example in a moment around fairness and bias. But we need to think about risks to individuals, such as patients in the healthcare provider example. Risk to the organization, such as the healthcare provider organization itself, right? If there's an AI mishap, what could be the impact to the healthcare provider organization, and how do we mitigate that? Even risks to entire ecosystems like the healthcare and life sciences industry as a whole. If there's a really severe mishap with AI and healthcare and life sciences, that could impact the entire industry. So we all need to get really proactive about this. Risk management is not a band-aid. We need to get proactive. The AI is a super powerful tool, but the risks need to be managed proactively to make sure that we maximize the good and effectively mitigate the risks. Let's go forward to the next slide. So here's a familiar example, just coming at AI from the security privacy standpoint, again, one of the principles. And we're just looking at AI through the lens of what's the technology and the data around AI, and how do we make sure we adequately map out the risks and mitigate them where needed. So large volumes of training data, potentially sensitive healthcare data, even if it's de-identified, we know there's often risk of re-identification, multi-layered defense in-depth, holistic approach. We got to protect those large volumes of data, hundreds of thousands of data samples, sometimes millions, lots and lots of data. The models themselves are intellectual property. We want to protect the confidentiality, but also the integrity and availability of those models so that they're always ready for use, right? As we depend on them more and more, it's really important they're available and ready and have integrity. The inference, so sensitive data could be input to the inference. The results of the inference could be sensitive healthcare data. That all needs to be protected in transit, at rest, in use. We need to protect, again, the confidentiality, so avoiding breach, integrity, information's accurate, complete, and up-to-date, availability, timely and reliable access. And from a privacy standpoint, the whole data lifecycle, collection of data, use of data in the AI, storage of data, disclosure or sharing if that's occurring, disposal of data at the end of life. So all of these risks need to be managed, but let's go a little bit deeper into one of the non-security and privacy principles. Let's go forward to the next slide. So let's look at the fairness example. So one of the things I talked about earlier that can compromise fairness is bias. That can lead to unfair outcomes. That is a risk we need to be thinking about mitigating with AI. And so, when you have your AI-ready risk management, you're going to add risks in there for the other principles. One of them, fairness, you may have a risk of bias in there. You're going to assign a likelihood and impact. It could be a qualitative risk assessment, so just high, medium, low for likelihood and impact. You can get to quantitative eventually, potentially assigning dollar values to impact and so forth. But to start off, many organizations may do a qualitative risk assessment. So you're going to prioritize the risks based on likelihood and impact. You're going to compare those risks to a baseline of acceptable risk. And then where needed, you're going to mitigate those risks. We recommend a prevent, monitor, detect, respond, remediate approach. So on the prevent side, how do we prevent bias, right? So you want to ensure you have a sufficiently large data set. It's high quality training data. It's representative of the whole group being served. Again, let's take the healthcare provider patient example, the whole patient population. We want to, again, mitigate that risk of bias in the AI model. Then, there could still be residual risk, even though we've taken those preventative steps. So we need to monitor the AI over time. We need to monitor the inputs to the model, the outputs from the model. Think of, like today, you have a security operations center. Think of an AI operations center. You have AI analysts. They're monitoring the models, the inference input and results, detecting and getting alerted as to potential bias that could occur. They are responding where needed to investigate, to analyze, halt the use of the model if needed, and then remediate if as needed, refiltering training data, augmenting it as needed, retraining the model. That's just one other example, but we want to kind of stretch the idea of hey, when you're doing security and privacy with AI, there's specific AI solutions and data you need to protect from security privacy, but you also need to think about the other principles like fairness, like mitigating risk of bias. Let's go forward. All right, back to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about some really actionable stuff that your organization can do now to operationalize what we've been talking about. So next slide, please, Jessica. Actually, David, I think this slide is yours.
Yeah, I'll talk to this one briefly. So leverage your existing security, privacy, risk management practice. Hold it up to one of the standards. Pick your standard. As Jeremy mentioned, two of the really good ones to start with, the NIST AI risk management framework, very substantial, very helpful. The ISO equivalents, you can click through on these links, have a look at them, look at your risk management through that lens, identify any gaps, address those, manage the risks to all the principles, add risks to individuals like patients, the organization, the ecosystem, and then, add the notion of AI assessment, certification, assurance as that becomes available. We want to have those AI assurance tokens so we can exchange those between organizations, rapidly establish that trust, that confidence, and get to the business of healthcare and the benefits. And really excited to be able to help you on that journey in partnership with HITRUST. Let's go forward.
Yeah, thanks, David. And a few things from my perspective, before we get into what's on the slide here. I think, number one, organizations, if you haven't yet, start inventorying your use of AI and ML. And if you think the population is zero, you're probably mistaken, because chances are in today's world, there's probably someone, be it a software engineer or a marketing professional, someone in your organization is very likely using a form of either predictive or generative AI. And so you really got to do the footwork to inventory the organization's use of AI. Why? Because there's risks, like I said, about using this type of tech. Despite the promise, you cannot secure what you don't identify and inventory, in my belief. So in addition to actually identifying the use, it's really important to start working toward documenting, where does the AI model sit? Who hosts it? Is it in the cloud? If so, which cloud? Also, what type of data in terms of sensitivity and volume, what type of data is being actually fed into this model? And how is the output of the AI being used? Is there a sufficient degree of human in the loop and human review before the output is really run with? So these kind of considerations you need to identify now, because it does take time. You could tack this identification onto your existing privacy impact analysis. If you've got a routine review for that, you could even piggyback on top of like a business impact analysis if you've got review for that, or just do a bespoke effort to identify the organization's use of AI. Again, this will take time, but it is the first most important step to eventual properly addressing the risks through the risk management processes David mentioned. And in addition to actually doing the inventory, I'd encourage everyone to start shoring up foundational cybersecurity control gaps now. Why? Because you can't have AI security without foundational cybersecurity. AI is a data and application kind of thing that sits on top of all this tech that foundational cybersecurity needs to address. And so if you have foundational cybersecurity problems and you have a goal of eventually getting to like a HITRUST issued AI certification report, one will prevent the other. So how do you identify and shore up foundational cybersecurity gaps? Consider the HITRUST E1 Essentials 1-year assessment and certification. It focuses on that foundational cybersecurity stuff. And it is the building block for one of these AI certifications that HITRUST will be releasing later in the year. Also, I'd encourage everyone to be vigilant about software vendors who've incorporated AI into their products, but aren't able to provide meaningful assurances about the strength of their AI security and AI risk management processes. Also, if you adopted AI into your customer-facing products, the time is now to start planning out your AI assurance timeline. As your customers, if they're not yet demanding it, they will soon be demanding that level of AI assurance by way of certifications or reports. or some other avenue to say, hey, you're using AI, show us, demonstrate that you're using AI responsibly and securely. And Jessica, if you go to the slide with the QR codes, next steps, you could, if you were interested in learning more, scan either one of these or all of these QR codes. We've got a link to Microsoft's Responsible AI Resource Center. We've got a link to HITRUST's AI Assurance Program Strategy document. Also, if you're wondering, like, hey, how do I find out when HITRUST releases some of the stuff that we've talked about in this webinar, the best way is to subscribe to HITRUST news alerts through that third QR code. And then also, we did a pretty heavy treatment of some of the concepts we've talked about briefly on this webinar in episode 8 of HITRUST podcast titled Trust versus AI. It's a fun set of conversations. I encourage everyone to check it out. Also, David mentioned earlier, next slide, Jessica, please. Stop by at HIMSS. If you're at HIMSS in Orlando on March 11th through the 15th, we'll be there, David and I both, and a number of others. We're also presenting alongside UPMC on the concept of global compliance at scale. So please come check us out. And with that, I think we'll transition over to Q&A. We've got just a few minutes. So thanks everyone for your attention.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeremy and David. As a reminder, you may submit written questions using the Q&A panel at the bottom right of your screen. Please type your questions in the text field and hit send. Please keep the drop down as all panelists. I'll hand it back to you, Jeremy, to address a few questions we had come in.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for the positive feedback coming through in the chat. I'm glad everyone liked the content that we prepared. We had a few questions come through. We may not have time to get to all of them. If not, that's okay. If you get your full name when you register, we'll reach out. I'm pretty sure everybody does, or with a response. So a couple of questions came through. I'm taking a look. One question dealt with the Microsoft Azure shared responsibility matrix that HITRUST hosts to reflect the inheritability of the HITRUST CSF requirements included in Azure's assessment. Question was, is that the latest? Is it up to date? The answer is yes. There's two places where you can download the Microsoft Azure Share Responsibility Matrix. One is on the HITRUSTalliance.net website. We've got a corner of our website where you can download the publicly available version. That is updated through 11.2. And there's also a second version that you can download from HITRUST assessment platform, which is MyCSF. And that is in the resources button in the top nav bar. And you'll see the link to download that as well. David, is there anything else you'd add about the SRM and the Azure inheritability?
No, I think you covered it well. There's a link to the Service Trust portal where you can find out details of the Azure HITRUST R2 certification. Maybe we can paste that link in the Q&A chat. But other than that, I think you covered it well. And just know that we're striving to continuously update that. We want to maximize your ability to inherit and benefit from the shared responsibilities. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know it was responded to in the chat, but David, maybe briefly, can you talk about what it means when we say HITRUST is available on the Azure Marketplace as fully Mac incentivized?
Yeah, so MACC, Microsoft Azure Consumption Commitment, we talked about that briefly, but it is a fairly complex topic, so let's talk a little bit more. So customers make Azure commitments to get a better Azure rate in terms of, the cost per compute unit, per storage unit, and so forth. So typically these commitments are in terms of a dollar amount of Azure usage over a specific period of years. Once the customer's made that commitment, they go about satisfying that commitment through their Azure use. Okay, and then what the Mac incentive enables is they can also count their purchases of Mac incentivized solutions on the Azure Marketplace towards that dollar commitment they've made. Okay, so the HITRUST annual subscription licensing fee can be purchased through the Azure Marketplace. Customers that do that can count the dollar for dollar value that they spend on HITRUST annually towards their Azure commitment, okay, along with their own Azure use. So when a customer purchases HITRUST through the Marketplace, they get billed for it through their regular monthly Azure bill. Okay, and we can paste a link to the HITRUST offer on the Azure Marketplace. Do look at that. Very exciting opportunity for you, again, to get really efficient with your Azure use and benefit from your procurement of HITRUST in this way.
Yeah, thank you, David. Another question sort of dealt with whether the NIST AI RMF content can be viewed itself as sort of an appropriate bar for AI security. It's a great question, and I say that sincerely. The NIST AI risk management framework and the accompanying risk management playbook website that NIST is hosting excellent resources for AI risk management content and considerations and objectives. But if you actually look at how HITRUST has mapped the AI risk management framework content into our risk management framework, our controls framework, the HITRUST CSF framework is spread out across 19 domains. One of those domains is risk management. Another one is privacy, and there's another one for like endpoint security and removable media and stuff like that. The AI RMF content squarely goes into our risk management domain, but there's so many other aspects of the risk management, our risk management framework, our controls framework that contain pragmatic, actual controls, actionable controls across all the different areas of the security and privacy spectrum, that the AI risk management framework alone gives excellent guidance on how to perform a AI inclusive risk assessment. And it's really more than a risk assessment, it's the entire risk management process. However, it's one slice of a very large framework. And this is reflected, I think, in other standards development organizations as well. Like ISO, I think is still working on their AI security controls standard, and it will contain a lot more than ISO 23894 does. So the AI RMF from NIST as well as 23894 from ISO, great guidance on how to perform a AI inclusive risk management process and risk assessment, risk treatment, stuff like that. But it alone is not enough, in our opinion, to actually map into our controls framework and stop. There's so much more to consider. So hopefully that's helpful. And I think we're coming up on time. David, were there any other questions that came through the chat that you feel like we have to address right now? Again, if we don't, we'll reach out and try to respond and engage with those who've asked. We don't have time to answer.
Yeah, no, I think you covered the top ones, and we are running out of time, as you mentioned, so we can follow up with the others offline. I did want to mention, just recap on something that Jeremy shared earlier. It's not like HITRUST versus one or other of these standards, right? The really exciting thing is, like, we're already seeing multiple great standards. The NIST one is certainly a great one, but multiple standards around AI and risk management and AI in general. And HITRUST has a wonderful role to play, like they have for security and privacy, in terms of harmonization of those standards, right? So that, and exciting things to come, like Compliance Insights report for AI risk management, where you can leverage your investment in HITRUST, report on that, look at it through the lens of one or other of these standards, and get a quick view of, hey, how does my practice currently hold up through the lens of that standard? So it really helps you analyze where you are and what you need to address to, again, get AI ready.
Yeah, thank you, David. This recording of this presentation, as well as the PowerPoint deck, will be emailed out to everyone who registered, and recording will also be hosted on the HITRUST webinars website. So thanks, everyone, for attending, and thanks for your attention.
Thanks, everyone.